Food bloggers, hi, how are you today? Thank you so much for tuning in to the Eat Blog Talk podcast. This is the place for food bloggers to get information and inspiration to accelerate your blog's growth and ultimately help you to achieve your freedom, whether that's financial, personal, or professional. I'm Megan Porta, and I've been a food blogger for over 12 years. I understand how isolating food blogging can be at times. I'm on a mission to motivate, inspire, and most importantly, let each and every food blogger, including you, know that you are heard and supported. I love this episode. I think you guys are going to really like it too. I have a chat with Caro Jensen. She is from the food blog caroha.com, and she shares with us how to build a strong food brand, and she gives us 4 easy steps to make that happen. This is episode number 384, and it is sponsored by Rank IQ. Enjoy. Hey, awesome food bloggers. Before we dig into this episode, I have a really quick favor to ask you. Go to your favorite podcast player, go to Eat Blog Talk, scroll down to the bottom where you see the ratings and review section. Leave Eat Blog Talk a 5-star rating if you love this podcast and leave a great review. This will only benefit this podcast. It adds value, and I so very much appreciate your efforts with this. Thank you so much for doing this. Okay, now on to the episode. Caro is a seasoned marketing professional who has worked in the food and wine space for over a decade. As a brand and PR manager in the wine industry, she's worked with bloggers directly and via agencies. She's also connected bloggers and brands as a marketing consultant and works as a food and wine content creator to build her own brand and channels. Hi, Caro. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Okay, before we get into it, we would love to hear if you have a fun fact about yourself to share.
Yeah, so my fun fact is that I actually met my husband on a train in Portugal.
Oh.
Yes, he was traveling overseas doing his OE, and I was studying at the time in Portugal. And I was due to go to an internship in New Zealand for an advertising agency, and I saw his passport. So I went over and said hi, which is not really like me. So
oh my gosh. So that's not something you would normally do.
No, not at all.
Oh, so that had to be a sign. Like, okay, I'm supposed to be talking to this guy for a reason.
Yeah, long story, but three children later, we're living in New Zealand, and so it's been an interesting journey for sure.
I love that. I'm picturing the whole scene in my head as you talk about it. So fun to know that. And I always find, I don't know about you, but I find learning about people's how they meet stories are so interesting. And not just couples, but like friends and people who have strong relationships. I always ask couples that when we're getting to know each other, because I think it's so fun to learn how people came together.
It is. Yes, it tells a lot about them, I think. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Cool. Thank you for sharing that, Caro. You are here today to talk about how to build a strong food brand in 4 easy steps. So I'm really excited to get into that. Would you mind starting by telling us a little bit about your blogging journey and your blog?
Yeah, so I guess my background is in brand building. I worked for a lot of wineries in different brand roles, and I started being a marketing consultant in 2008, which was SIP NZ Wine. And with the blog, I connected wineries with brands. I created New Zealand Rosé Day and ran some social media campaigns. And that's how I sort of got my first experience in blogging, connecting wineries to consumers, because there was a real gap between wineries producing rosé wine and consumers wanting to know more about it. And it was more of a lifestyle category that brands are not so comfortable with in the wine space to market to. And that was sort of quite a revolutionary thing over here. Was one of the first wine blogs, and I partnered up with a friend of mine, and together we connected a lot of brands, and that's basically how sort of blogging and branding came about. And this year I rebranded SIP NZ Wine into caroha.com. This is my food brand and my food blog. And I sort of decided that I wanted to create more of my own content rather than sharing wineries' content. And my passion is really also in photography. So I've taught myself a lot and really sort of dove headfirst into photography and videography and creating my own content. And that's how I sort of got immersed in the food blogging community, and which I really love, that everybody's so open and helping each other. That's sort of quite new to to me. And yeah, so I thought, what's one way to give back to the community, which is my background in branding. And I sort of see people not really sort of using branding to their full potential. And I thought maybe I can share some tips from my experience.
I love that you have a background in branding and that you're bringing that into blogging and offering it up as kind of a service to help bloggers, because this is something I feel we don't dig into enough. We hear people talk about it. We hear people talk about the importance of it. But then it's like one of those things that personally I push aside and, I don't prioritize it. So super eager to hear what you have to say, especially with all of your expertise. So let's just get right into it. What are your 4 steps for building a strong food brand?
So I just wanted to pedal back just one thing. The brand is not your logo on the food blog. And I think that's probably the first thing that people sort of think. They create a logo and then they feel like the branding, it's done. And I think sort of it's easy to forget that branding has a lot of touch points. You are the brand in most places in the food blog. Most people are happy to have a personal connection to the blog. So there are a lot of different touch points. And I sort of feel, especially in the moment with SEO being so focused on writing for a toddler and sort of taking all personality out and everybody using their same themes, there's sort of a real opportunity to set your food blog apart with some branding. And I think it starts with number 1, which is basically your brand values. When a visitor or a reader, somebody from Google discovers your site, they should really very quickly get to know you and your brand, and that's through your brand values. And how you get to the brand values is that you first define your brand mission. And that sounds very marketing lingo and quite hard, but it's really just why did you start your blog? It's one part, I guess, that sort of becomes apparent in the About Us page. But I encourage everybody to just sort of sit down with a piece of paper and just sort of answer these questions, whether you have been blogging for a long time or you're just getting started. So you just write down, so why have I started the food blog? Is it because I was diagnosed celiac? Because I went vegan? I got myself an air fryer. I'm just a passionate foodie that loves to share my grandma's recipes. So that's the sort of brand mission that you could have. And from there onwards, you would create your brand vision, which is kind of just, you've probably heard of the term, the vision board.
Yes.
Where you sit down which is a fun exercise in my view, where you sort of sit down on Pinterest and just start pulling pictures, words, and emotions, and just start to dream big. In 5 years, in 10 years, do you want to be the go-to place for vegan desserts, or are you going to be the number 1 site for air fry recipes, for example? So it's just sort of, so you start with your brand mission and then you turn it into your brand vision. And out of that, you really get to your brand values. And those are kind of your values or beliefs that you're going to use to get to your vision. So that might be that you have healthy recipes, that you have vegan recipes, that you have simple recipes. So in the food niche, it's quite easy because that's basically connected to your recipes. What kind of food, what kind of value are you going to offering to the reader? And I guess that's sort of when people are talking about niching down, that's really in which niche do you operate? But it really comes back to what are you offering to the reader? What are the values that you can offer to the reader? Yeah, and that's sort of the first exercise that I would encourage everybody to do, and to get really a clear idea about what do you stand for, how do you serve your reader, and that really gives you the direction of which recipes do I want to keyword research. Maybe you might skip over a few that don't align with your values.
Yeah, so it's like the building the foundation for everything else that you're making for your blog. How do you recommend creating a mission statement? I think hearing that kind of makes me think of corporate world.
Yes.
And I shut down a little bit because, whatever. So where do we start with that? How do we go about doing that?
Yeah, I think you just ask yourself, why does my blog exist and why did I start my blog? It really can come from you. So your mission statement comes from you. which, I mean, if you just started your blog to come onto Videovine and make some money, I hope that's very unlikely in the food space. But usually you have a fundamental reason of why you started a blog, and that should be shared with the reader, because people connect over personal experience. I think it's really important to sort of get to know the person a little bit more as well.
I like how you said that. So I think it would be easy for me to sit down and think of that fundamental reason. I started Why I Continue my blog, and I think most of us can probably write that out just right now, right? I mean, we wouldn't even have to give that much thought. We already know it.
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
I think so. So it's not, you don't need to overthink it or start Googling mission statements of Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
It's, you're a personal food brand. So a mission statement really lies within you. And that's actually quite easy to do. And it's the same with the brand vision. It's what you envision want for your blog. It's not what any external factors play into it. It's really what do you want to achieve with a blog? What best case scenario? What would that look like? And that's not, you might have financial goals, but it's sort of more driven off where do you see the blog and the blogging landscape sit after 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. And then tagline too, I feel like taglines come to us even before we do anything. Maybe I'm wrong, but I know when I was starting my blog, I had all of these ideas because I knew the fundamental reason I was starting, and you kind of associate like a little snippet of words that tell people, kind of explain your brand. Or how would you define a tagline?
A tagline, I mean, really, it's from a branding perspective. You share a tagline, everybody knows quickly what you're all about in a few very, very succinct way. And that tagline, usually once you've done the exercise, especially once you have the values of what you're standing for, you kind of spin that into a tagline. So for example, for me, it's I make recipes that are from scratch and it's comfort food. So and that are reliable. So my tagline is delicious food from scratch. It might be vegan food in a minute. It might be air fryer made simple, just to sort of throw some out. So it's usually a very succinct, slogan-like way, but also like extra points if it's keywords researched. So if you use in your tagline that you will use everywhere, which I encourage to use on all the channels, which I come to later, but it's really great if you can also keep some keyword research in mind, because it does help getting picked up in the right place.
Right. Oh, you said that much better than I did. So thank you for talking through that. Okay, so once we've defined our values, our mission statement, tagline, kind of defined our story and why we're here, why we're doing what we're doing, what would be the next step?
So once I have a tagline, I usually encourage brands to create like a 200-word and a 500-word brand overview. And that's basically your About Us page sorted at that point. But really, it gives you sort of a document where you have your brand name, you have your tagline, and then you have your brand descriptions. Once you have them done, you can basically then, whenever somebody says, for example, you're invited on a podcast, can you send me a bio? You just copy paste, and it's always going to be the same. You add it to your newsletter, you add it to all the different places. So I think that's where consistency comes in, but it's just really good to sit down once and write it and make sure it's very succinct, that it aligns with your brand values and mission statement, and then sort of have this go-to place of copy that you can just grab wherever you need it.
Yeah. So you're saying put that all on the About page on your blog, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's SEO comes into play, but I think I would have it in a document, just somewhere on your server, and then, but it's really just a very good foundation for your About Us page, yes.
Yeah, I like the idea of just copying and pasting. So you get it all down, you figure out who you're serving, why you're serving, get it on paper, and then you can repurpose it as needed. You don't have to rewrite it every single time somebody asks you for it.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Is that all with defining your brand values? Okay. Why don't you talk about step number 2 then, Caro?
Yeah, so that's my favorite part when I work with brands. And that's where people sort of, when brands come to me, it's usually that they are sort of already have something they want to share. So it's basically the look and feel and the brand identity. So how I go about it is, so you have already your vision board, which is great, which is a perfect starting point, really. But then you kind of create a mood board, and the mood board You can get inspiration from Pinterest or magazines, other blogs, social media. But especially in the food space, what I also think it's a really good source is restaurants and cafes, because it's sort of you're creating a look and feel and a space, an online space. So if you think of your favorite restaurants that align with your niche, then that sort of has a lot of cues properly in it, like what are the tables, what is the decor, what's the menu written like. So it sort of gives you a bit of a starting point of in which direction you might want to go. And that's always a bit of a fun stage where you can just really plug everything together. So I just opened basically like a PowerPoint blank sheet and just drop everything in that I sort of like and associate with the brand. And that's basically from photos over fonts and colors. Pinterest is really good to have. If you Google color palettes, for example, your primary color is, you would like to have your primary color to be an orange, then you would punch in color palettes and there's just all basically done for you. So they have a lot of examples where they complement it with imagery, also shapes. You might want to have a certain shape that's sort of recognizable, icons. So you just sort of anything that you feel drawn to and that sort of fits your niche. I guess if you're healthy, vegan food blogger, for example, then you're probably more drawn to light and bright and punchy colors versus somebody who's sort of maybe more in the rustic food barbecue area.
Yeah, right. So put together a mood board of sorts. You can do that in a variety of ways. And then do you put anything official together as a way to show maybe brands or people who come on board on your team or anything like that?
Yeah, so the mood board is then I sort of edit it down a little bit to make sure it's all succinct. So materials and textures as well. But basically what you're going into then is a brand style guide. And that's something you would share with external people. I wouldn't necessarily share my mood board, but a brand style guide is basically where you then formalize everything that becomes sort of your style guide is anything you're going to create. Any content you're creating needs to basically align with your style guide. So usually you have the logo at the top and your fav icon. You have your logos in different versions. So if you have a brand partnership and they would like to use it as reversed or as a horizontal, and you use it in a different way on your blog, just to have different options on how to apply your logo correctly. And then you have your color palette, which usually has an accent color and some supporting colors in it. And with the color palette, you would even go as far as having the hex code. So when you're creating a newsletter, for example, and you wonder what color your button on your homepage is, you probably want to make sure that's all consistent. So you just refer to your style guide and just grab the hex code and make sure you have the right font combination, which is obviously limited by your theme. But you could create imagery where you overlay fonts if you want to use a particular font, for example. Yeah, and then what I also include for food bloggers is the portrait shot, which is really important, I think. A lot of food bloggers are really, really good in photography. So taking a photo of yourself isn't as taking a photo of a stack of pancakes. But you have the skills. So really, I think you should if you don't want to outsource this, you should make a real priority to create a great headshot of yourself for your website and for other places as well. That really also, again, communicates your brand values. And that's something that I even research in the mood board stage. Which sort of portrait shots do I like of creative people? What are the poses? What are the props? What do I want people feel like? I sort of think of it as if I meet somebody for coffee and they sit down and see me the first time, sort of how do I want to come across? It's all part of your branding, really.
Hey, food bloggers, let's chat about RankIQ really quick. If you are looking for a way to give your Q1 and Q2 content a quick boost for extra traffic and revenue, let's do it. Try this easy strategy. Pick a post or a category that typically does really well this time of year. Go to rankiq.com and type that topic into the keyword research library. Sort from lowest to highest competition and scroll through the keyword options and see if anything aligns with your expertise and your content. From the list, choose one informational topic to write about and choose one roundup to put together. Publish both within a few days, interlink it all to your existing content and to each other, and watch your traffic grow. Go to rankiq.com to sign up and check it out for yourself. Now back to the episode. I kind of have unintentionally done this. So the color of the Eat Blog Talk logo, it's like a magenta, like a dark magenta kind of. Love that color. And I, for the longest time, would wear that color in my portraits, my headshots. And I didn't realize I was doing it. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I'm wearing the same color. I should probably wear something different so that my logo, I don't like blend into my logo. So I started wearing just black because I thought, oh, that can stand out. So it's funny that you can do that without even really thinking through,
Yes.
the mood board and the brand style guide, and just unintentionally you do these things.
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, I think people are sort of used to consistency, and I think subconsciously you probably do that already yourself. You're not sort of starting your brand and thinking, oh, I'm going to use every color of the rainbow, unless very unusual.
We're drawn to certain colors, and we probably do that in our wardrobes and the way we style.
I guess you're creating look and feel. So how you want to look and feel, that's basically what you already subconsciously do.
Yeah, right. So that can lead into styles of photography as well, right? The styles that we take our food photos with.
That's right. So you have got your brand style guide sorted, which you usually share if you do brand alignments, brand partnerships that people are using your brand. It's always good to share that. But then being a food photographer and videographer, I recommend creating a style guide just for that. Look at the food photography that you like, that you're working towards to, and really analyze the photos. And I think you had somebody on the podcast recently actually who did a whole episode on it, which was really helpful. So to really look at the props and the angles, which backdrops you're using, what's the look and feel of the photos, what's the editing style, and then also in videography, what's the music that's being used, what are the editing styles in the video transitions, is that light and bright versus moody and rustic, and then really use that also as a starting point to create your prop collection. It's easy as a food photographer, I think, when you're getting into food photography, to run to your secondhand shop and just buy anything that looks like food photography and sort of randomly have a selection of plates that you're never going to use. I think if you carefully analyze of what fits actually into your look and feel, you would be a lot more intentional in getting your prop kit established.
Okay, and then I had one other question, and then I want to go back because I have an overarching question. But where else does this bleed into as far as like creating that look and feel? Can it bleed into Instagram, YouTube, like any channels that you have outside of your blog?
Yes, definitely. So in consistency, I would touch on where it all goes. But really, I mean, the blog is not even, if you think of it, your logo is your brand. I think not even your blog is your brand. So you're creating a whole sort of ecosphere of where you are present, and that's all sort of your brand. And I mean, it's your blog, it's your newsletter, it's your social media channels, it's your web stories, it's your products. If you have ebooks on your site, it's cooking classes, it's any services, any pitch decks that you're putting together. I mean, there are so many touch points that you have with a blog, with a brand. You really sort of, when you're creating these styles and guides, and you really have to keep in mind that this needs to apply for all those different touch points. So don't limit yourself just to the food photo on your blog post. That's a very, very small part of your visual identity.
Yeah. Being consistent through all of the things, right? There's so many things we have to keep our hands in. And then my other question was, how much time do you recommend us spending on all of this? Because we're all busy, and it's something that we can so easily set aside because it's not, quote, necessary. So break down what you think the time commitment would be.
I think it's easy to overthink it and get carried away and never actually push live on your blog to start with, because you're getting hung up on the complementary color on your blog. Definitely spend some time on it, but it's not something that's set in stone that can never, being online, that you can't tweak and move towards to. So I feel take a day and try to, before you start the blog, or or when you are already an established blog, just to sort of do a brand audit and just run through these and just making sure that you're on the right path. And then as you're writing maybe the next newsletter, tweak the button color because it's actually not on brand, or when you're working towards photography, a big body of photography work, just sort of pivot into a direction. It's not something that you can't change. You don't want to change your branding and like drastically, every quarter with the seasons, but it's being an online content creator, you have the luxury of actually trying a few things out. I think it's also easy to box yourself into I'm light and bright and nothing else goes. And it's sort of, there's, for example, like in the rustic category, there's rustic that's quite light and there's rustic that's very moody. Don't make it too narrow, because then you're feeling like you're just stamping out the same content over and over again, which is very uninspiring, I think, as well. So give yourself some guidance, but don't overthink it.
And allowing some margin too, so that you can experiment, right? Because just because you've defined your brand doesn't mean that you can't. If you have a light and colorful photo style, you can still experiment with dark and moody and see how that goes.
That's right. Yeah. And on your blog, you're also training your user or your reader. So if you have an accent color that's your link color of call to action colors that you want them to act upon, then it's good to keep that consistent, because the reader will know that, oh, there's your magenta from Megan. You scan the page, it's like, oh, here, subscribe to the newsletter, and oh, here's another button, and here's another link. It's not just for pure aesthetics. It also has a function.
Yeah, that's good to think through too. People associate certain colors and will kind of not knowingly keep that in mind as they scroll through your content, right?
Yes, yeah. And you can even go as far as in color theory a little bit. They're complementary colors in a color wheel, but then there are also colors that stand for a certain mood. If you want to sort of and look into that a little bit as well, that's quite helpful as well. And some industries stand for financial blogs, often have, a light blue and gray. And so there's definitely also industry standards.
And you don't have to stick with those, right? I mean, you can kind of
definitely not
be yourself, even though there's like a norm for some industries. Okay, anything else on step 2 before we move on to step 3?
No, I think that's we've covered everything there.
All right. Talk to us about number 3.
So I guess once we have now the look and feel sorted, it goes to the tone. So the written word that you're using. And with a written word similar to the logo and the identity, you just think straight away, oh, how do I write my blog post? And it has to be SEO friendly, and I can't really do anything else. and I think it's easy to forget that you're writing content all over the place. It's not just a blog post. You have your newsletters where you can inject a lot of personality, a lot of brand values, and really reflect that. You have your About Us page where you can still have a keyword research copy, but you can definitely portray a little bit more of your personality. You have your social media captions, which are not SEO'd. Your copy that you lay over videos or any voiceover that you're using on videos. You have got your freebies, any maybe digital products that you're selling. You've got your web stories. You have got your emails that you're writing to readers that you're applying to comments to. So there's a lot of room to really be on brand, to call it, but just be yourself. And I think it's just always easier when you're sort of defining your tone to just be yourself, because it's just so much easier than trying to be some sort of different version of yourself where you constantly have to try hard to inject words that you usually wouldn't use.
And there are so many of us that we need to be ourselves. And that's going to be one of those things that really sets us apart and makes people like us. When we can just drop all of the fronts and stop trying to be like other people and just be us.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it helps to have a little bit of a word bank, I call it, where when I read copy or anything, it's like, I really like that word. And, I might want to add it actually to my vocabulary, not just to my blog posts, where you're sort of expanding there, especially me. I'm not a native speaker, so that really helps. But I think generally just be yourself, but just keep in mind that you want to be consistently yourself across all the platforms, and be aware that if you are writing a guest post or you're writing an email, that's basically also part of your brand.
I like your word bank idea. That is so good, because once in a while I do hear words that I'm like, why don't I use that more? That's such a good word. I really like it. And then another thing to go along with setting tone is there's this new wave of food bloggers getting into podcasting to support their food blogs. And I believe that that is a solid, awesome way to set a new kind of tone for your brand, to kind of reach people in a new way. Hearing your spoken voice, there's nothing like it. You can write all day and then have one little conversation with someone verbally, and it just completely changes their perspective of you. So I think that is another way to set a tone. And YouTube video as well, right?
Yes, yeah. Videos, especially the voiceover, is quite popular. That's a great way to connect with your audience.
Yeah, love it. Okay, what is step number 4, Caro?
It's consistency, and that's really the hardest part. It sounds easy, but just staying consistent. So, as I said, don't box yourself in, but you have all these different outlets that I've just mentioned, and just trying to, when you create this freebie, not jump onto Canva and get a completely different template that has nothing to do with your brand, and send it out, and somebody subscribes to your email address and gets us like, oh, where did I get that from? And I guess it's just really trying to be consistent. You don't need to have a brand menu like McDonald's or Starbucks, where they really have guidelines around every little thing and every little usage of their logo, but try to be consistent across your platforms. It's very important. And it comes down to even face-to-face. I heard somebody the other day saying that they're really aware of how they talk to their team members, that they're, not on brand, but it's just trying to be consistent in how you approach conversation with clients or your peer-to-peers and your team members, how you present yourself in digital meetings. If you run cooking classes, and you mentioned being guest on podcasts, you want to make sure that you just be consistent across all those areas. And if you're, for example, starting to offer services like photography or blog post writing, that if you're sending a pitching deck, it should come from you. They should know that it's from you, and don't reinvent the wheel there. It makes it a lot easier too.
Yeah. I love this. I love the consistent part, because I do notice when people are not consistent, when brands aren't consistent. It's like when one of my boys does something that's out of character, I'm like, wait, what? That's not you. That's not your brand. It's the same thing with businesses and brands. You notice when there's not an alignment, right?
Yeah, I think it makes you also question what are they telling me that they aren't? It's sort of the trust sort of goes in a way, and you want to trust a brand. And I think it comes down to if you're a vegan blogger and then you share the steak recipe, because it has very high search volume and low competition, the whole trust just goes. It's an extreme example, but it's the same as if you, say a vegan food blogger and have a leopard pattern in your profile photo. I guess it's just, you just need to sort of just be aware of what people think of you. And if that's what you're striving for, that you sort of reinforce those experiences.
That is good. Okay, Caro, is there anything else about your steps that you wanted to say before we start saying goodbye?
No, I think that's all. Yeah.
Okay, and just one more question for you. Do you feel like getting all of this together and just taking the time to think through it will help our businesses? And if so, in what ways will it help?
Yeah, I think first of all, if I look for a recipe and I visit a food blog and there's this very strong branding approach that aligns with my values, I'm far more likely to subscribe to their newsletter and check out their social media. So I think conversion is a lot higher if you find, and you're going to find your people that are really highly engaged. Once you have really a target audience or an audience that is highly engaged, that really aligns with your values and responds to it, then you can create brand partnerships with similar brands that share the same audience very successfully. So when I pair up brands. As a marketing consultant, I look at what do the brands stand for, which influencers do we work with, do they have a crossover in target audience, because basically the brand wants to sell their product or service to your audience. So if you're really succinct and have a very strong brand message and a very engaged audience, then you are going to get the brand deals that you like and that you want. And I would also just sit down as part of your mood board or vision board, add those brands that you want to work with, that really are your dream brands, that you are fully aligned with, and work towards that. And when you pitch to them, say, I have an audience that has an affinity with these brand values that we have in common. And I would like to introduce them to your products and services. So really approach your brand partnership of what's in it for the brand, and that you understand their brand, because you're talking to the marketing department. So if you talk their language, you're far more likely to get the brand deal.
Ooh, that's a great point right there. Speak their language and you're ahead of so many other people.
Yes.
What a great conversation, Caro. Thank you so much. This is super valuable. So thank you for being here. It was such a pleasure.
I hope it was helpful.
Yes. To end, do you have either a favorite quote or words of inspiration to leave us with today?
Yes. So I walked across Spain with my husband and on a pilgrimage walk, and you say buen camino, which means, sort of have a good way. And I think really that sort of shaped my way of thinking a little bit, that the journey is a destination. And I think in blogging it's so easy to just focus on that Mediavine qualification or any other ad network and just sort of look towards the carrot and actually not enjoy the journey. And I think it's really important to, when you're feeling burned out or if you are just feeling not inspired, to just stop and just remind yourself, which the mission statement comes in, why did I start this, and why does it bring me joy, and what am I trying to do here, and enjoy the journey, and don't get too carried away with the goal in mind.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you, Caro. We'll put together some show notes for you. You can go to eblogtalk.com/Caro Ha. So that's CAROHA. Why don't you share where everyone can find you on your blog and everywhere else?
Yeah, so it's what you see. So it's caroha.com on all platforms. So I'm mainly on Instagram. I started TikTok. I'm struggling. So please say hi.
I will do that today.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my blog, my Instagram is probably the best place you can find me. And if you need help, or I have a template of how to work through this brand journey, just send me an email or a DM, and I'm happy to share my templates with you as well. So I'm happy to help. I got so much back from the community and learned so much, so I'm happy to contribute as well.
Oh, love that so much. Thanks again for being here, and thank you for listening today, food bloggers. I will see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Eat Blog Talk. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd be so grateful if you posted it to your social media feed and stories. I will see you next time.